Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Shawna, Khalafi, and we are continuing to follow this breaking news out of the Middle East tonight. The U.S. and Israel launching a coordinated attack on Iran. Several strikes have been reported across the country. And we also have this from Fox correspondent Trey Yingst, who is located inside of Israel. He says multiple explosions heard in Tel Aviv, a few interceptions, and a live look at Tel Aviv right now. It is now daytime in the Middle East there, just about 1 p.m. in Iran approaching. So this attack happening in the daylight hours. Again, multiple strikes reported across Iran, and the U.S. and Israel launching this attack in coordination. We've heard from President Trump since this happened. We also got a statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. For more on this very developing situation, we want to bring in research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Janatan. He is focused on Iranian domestic affairs and the Islamic Republic's regional influence. So there's still a lot of information coming in by the moment here, and still a lot of questions that we're waiting to hear. So can you give us the basics of what we know at this point and what the implications could be, not just for Iran and Israel, the U.S., but regionally throughout the Middle East?
Hi, and it's great to be with you. We're truly witnessing history right now. It is unprecedented to have this extent of an attack led by the United States against the Islamic Republic, at least overtly. So what we do know so far is that the president himself put out a statement, and the statement itself, I think, is indicative of how Washington views this conflict. Of course, the first remarks were addressed to the American people, laying out the foundations as to why the Islamic Republic has been a threat to the United States for the past about half a century, talking about nuclear and, of course, the ballistic missile ranges. But the ending was very significant. The final really sentences of the remark was talking to the Iranian people, highlighting that their time is now or never, and that is really crucial messaging. So when you look at what's happening on the ground, as the president noted, the first wave is going to be military targets, and after that, we're going to probably see a more crackdown on the repression apparatus that would allow Iran's civil society to breathe. This is mirroring to an extent the 12-day war, that it was happening in sequences, but it appears that the communication to the Iranian people, it's much more clear. It is leveraging the opposition leader, the crown prince, who's been in touch with Iranians. And of course, really, you're hearing remarks coming from both Washington and Jerusalem and the exiled prince, if you're an Iranian in Iran. So very unprecedented on all fronts.
And we just got these new images into our newsroom of smoke rising over Iran following these strikes. So this is a new video that we just got in. So we know that there were a number of targets here, several strikes reported across Iran, but we know that the first strike reportedly was near the offices of the supreme leader, the Ayatollah. And he hasn't been seen for a while now. What is the probability that he was inside the offices at the time? That is still one of the questions that we're waiting to be answered. And would he remain so close to his offices with, of course, many people predicting that these strikes could happen at any moment?
It is very notable for the strikes to actually take place at the beginning of the week. I think a lot of Iranians, both regime officials and ordinary people, thought should there be an attack, it would be around Friday evening like it was during the 12-day war. But this time around, it was after sunlight. So maybe it caught them off guard to an extent. But when we're talking about striking Khamenei, it is not strictly about taking him out immediately. So once Iranians see there's smoke coming from his compound, that signal is enough to remind every person in Tehran that is a population of about 15 million people. It's the heartbeat of Iran, effectively. That sends a message that help is on the way. And really, it's really about portraying that image. As to where he is right now, we don't know. Of course, he has a few different bunkers, but time is limited. Of course, Israelis and American intelligence services will ultimately be able to identify where he is. But when we talk about the prospects of a democratic transition in the Iranian really history right now, as we talk about what's happening, Khamenei, the supreme leader, is only one of the few pillars. If you really want to bring about change, of course, he's the symbol of the regime, he's the head of the Islamic Republic. But unlike the situation like Gaddafi in Libya or Saddam Hussein, uh, this regime has different institutions that are keeping it afloat. And of course, the supreme leader is the main one. So you're also thinking about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, something that the president specifically addressed during his initial remarks, saying that you have to join the people or face the consequences.
And we're also getting a statement from the exiled Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi. He put out a pretty lengthy statement on social media. So we want to read that out in full right now, and we'll get your reaction to that. Of course, President Trump, as well as Netanyahu, while talking about nuclear capabilities and those failed negotiations, they also addressed the Iranian people, saying this is your chance to take your government back, take it back from the Islamic regime. Of course, before that, the Pahlavis were in power. So this is Reza Pahlavi, the exiled Crown Prince, with the statement on social media in the last hour or so. He says, "My dear compatriots, the moments of destiny lie ahead of us. The aid that the President of the United States promised to the brave people of Iran has now arrived. This is a humanitarian intervention, and its target is the Islamic Republic, its repressive apparatus, and its machinery of slaughter, not the country and great nation of Iran. But even with the arrival of this aid, the final victory will still be forged by our hands. It is we, the people of Iran, who will finish the job in this final battle. The time to return to the streets is near." Now that the Islamic Republic is collapsing, my message to the country's military, police, and security forces is clear. You have sworn an oath to protect Iran and the Iranian people, not the Islamic Republic and its leaders. Your duty is to defend the people, not a regime that has taken our homeland hostage through repression and crime. Join the people and help bring about a stable and secure transition. Otherwise, you will go down with Khamenei's sinking ship and his regime. And my message to the President of the United States, President Trump, is this: the noble people of Iran, despite the savage repression and massacres of this regime, stood firm with courage for nearly 2 months. I now ask you to exercise the utmost caution to preserve the lives of civilians and my compatriots. The people of Iran are our natural allies and those of the free world, and they will never forget your support in the most difficult period in contemporary Iranian history. And to you, my dear compatriots in Iran, in these sensitive hours and days, more than ever, we must stay focused on our ultimate goal, reclaiming Iran. I ask you to remain in your homes for now and preserve your safety and security. Stay vigilant and ready so that at the appropriate time, which I will announce to you precisely, we can return to the streets for the final action. Follow my messages through social media and satellite media. If there are disruptions to the internet and satellite, I will stay in touch with you via radio waves. So Reza Pahlavi, the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, putting out that statement on social media following these strikes on Iran from the U.S. and Israel. He says when the time is right that he will tell the Iranian people to return to the streets, reclaim their power from the Islamic regime. And Pahlavi has said that he wants to play a role in a transition back to democracy for Iran. Give us your takeaways from this statement from Pahlavi and what kind of role he will play in a possible regime change that some are saying that this could lead to in Iran.
The statements coming from the Crown Prince, of course, were truly, really powerful. And of course, they resonate with more than 90 million Iranians inside the country. So we have to remember when he actually assumed leadership of Iran's opposition, something he's done for years, but he really more proactively issued a statement about a month ago calling on protests to take place and expand. And that's when we saw the highest demonstrations against the Islamic Republic in Iran's history. That's crucial. Of course, there's no reliable polling coming from Iran. And given that the elections are neither free or fair, this is the only way that we can gauge what Iranians want on the ground. And of course, once he called on people to take to the streets, we saw millions come out. We saw the most brutal crackdown, and that was really posed an existential threat to the regime. We saw them waving the pre-1979 flag with that depicts the sun and the lion, an ancient Iranian symbol. We saw Iranians chant his name, that this is the final battle, Pahlavi will return. And as to how we got here, Iranians exhausted every other option. I remember in 2009 when I was in Iran and we were protesting, the idea then was we can somehow get reform through the system. As that went on and that got crushed, we saw under Rouhani trying to pursue a JCPOA that didn't go anywhere either. And now really Iranians are looking at their past for their future. It's not just nostalgia. The idea is that this could be a framework for Iranians to build upon, to reclaim their country and reclaim their national identity. And I think what Pahlavi has said time and time again is really crucial, that he wants to lead a transition. He has a plan in place that would ensure that, of course, Iran stays unified, because we do not want to see fractures that could lead to further instability. He does have a day after plan, and it's really important for us to keep a close eye to what he says and signals to Iranians. I think his remarks very, very critical, saying that time is coming, but not quite yet. You need to stay safe until the major military strikes are over. Then you will know when it's time to go out.
And we've seen those warnings coming into other countries in the region. Of course, Israel and Netanyahu putting out warnings to people there. We've also heard it reported that there's been explosions heard in Tel Aviv. And we also saw Qatar putting out warnings to their citizens as well to shelter and be prepared for possible retaliation. What could be the more widespread impact of this for the Middle East? What can we expect maybe in the coming hours or days as things are changing pretty rapidly there?
We are already seeing retaliation from the Islamic Republic. And it's very important for us to at this point distinguish between Iranians and the Islamic Republic officials. So moving forward, when you hear these two terms, they're no longer synonymous, and Iranians made that clear. So the retaliation coming from the regime right now, of course, is targeting the US fleet, is going to realistically target US bases in the region. And as I look at my phone, actually, I see more and more notifications coming about shelter in place for Israelis. There's numerous missiles being launched towards that direction. And this is something that we've seen before during the 12-day war. So when you look at the Islamic Republic's missile capabilities, sometimes the debate is whether it's about quantity versus quality, but it's not that simple either. Because when you look at the first stages of the war, during the 12-day war, we saw about up to 200 missiles get launched at Israel, and almost none of them struck targets. That said, as the war went on, we saw the numbers decrease, but somehow the accuracy increased. So we get to really narrow down exactly, of course, which missiles we're talking about. Some might be cruise. They might be supplemented with drone storms. This is something that the Islamic Republic has threatened before. Another really concerning threat issued by the regime is actually going after US embassies. This is something they've done, of course, inside Iran. This is something they've done in Iraq, which is why the United States eliminated General Soleimani at the time. But the more concerning one would be if the regime were to tap in its terror network, whether it's in Europe or in America. Unfortunately, they do have an extensive reach of ideological really affiliates and gangs throughout the West. So that might be also the case, because now the regime is in full crisis scenario. This is for them also a battle of no return. For them also, it's now or never. So of course, given the jihadi and Islamist mindset that they have, realistically, they're going to pursue the wildest cards that we may not have even seen before. There's a likely chance that they might even tap to an arsenal that we haven't heard of. We know they used chemical weapons against their own people. That is another, of course, unfortunate possibility. But as we look at all these options, again, time is limited, and the Islamic Republic officials know it's now time for them to decide if they really want to pursue this war, or many of them are going to defect and join the people.
And this is that video again, just in the hours after the U.S. and Israel struck Iran. This is the images of smoke rising above Tehran, and we know there were multiple strikes reported across the country. I want to ask you one more thing here, Jonathan. So Netanyahu and Israel is putting a name to this operation. They're calling it Operation Roaring Lion. Of course, the pre-revolutionary flag of Iran had a lion in place of the Islamic symbol that it has now. What is the significance of this name for people that might not be too familiar with the history of the Islamic Republic's takeover of Iran?
Of course. So as we noted earlier, the lion and the sun, primarily the lion, has been an ancient symbol of Iranian identity. You know, Iran's history goes back about 2,500 years. It's one of the very few countries that it's so ancient that it doesn't even have a quote unquote foundation date. Because of that, you see a lot of symbolism, prehistoric effective symbolism, and the sun and the lion are one of the major ones. In this particular case, we saw Israelis actually named their 12-day war operation something similar. But what's interesting is that, of course, Israelis have also really used a lion to resemble their identity as well. So I think the way to look at this is that it is signals a really brotherhood and alliance with the Iranian people. That has something that Israel has been advocating and promoting publicly. If you look at the 12-day war, there was no mention of leveraging separatist groups. It was all about a unified nationalist Iran. So really, they understand the Iranian context better than anyone in the Middle East. We're talking about the Israelis. And it's great to see that America is now increasingly more aligned on that. And that is because Iranians have publicly stated that, one, they do not see this regime as legitimate. We have to remember only a few weeks ago, the Islamic Republic authorities killed about 40,000 unarmed Iranians within a couple of days. So the sheer brutality of that massacre tells you that, of course, they're not here to defend Iranians. And Iranians know that. They've publicly stated that. And they've also expressed that they want normalization with Israel. That is something that, oddly enough, polls also support, even though like many polls are unreliable, they're still consistent on one front, that Iranians want normalization with Israel. As if you're an Iranian on the ground and you look at the Middle East, Israel's the only country that has the same incentive and threat as you, which is the Islamic Republic. When Iranians saw what happened on October 7th, in a very horrible and brutal way, it resonated with them because that's something, those are the crimes that the Islamic Republic has carried out against the Iranians as it funds Hamas against, of course, Israelis. So when you're an Iranian, you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at Qatar, you look at Oman, your neighboring countries for the longest time were the ones that were aiding or enabling the Islamic Republic, while Israel has stood by your side. And that's something that's going to be written in history for Iranians.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan, for your input here. We really appreciate it. As the U.S. and Israel launching military strikes on Iran, now explosions being heard in Israel, also other countries in the region bracing for possible retaliation. We are going to continue to follow any updates that come here. Right now, I'm going to show you a live look over Tel Aviv.